Welcome to the Action Lab Leadership Podcast, the show where we have honest, unfiltered conversations with business leaders. I'm Danny, founder of Action Lab Leadership, and today I'm joined by Jim Lewis, owner of Area 254. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Danny. It's good to be here.
Let's start where I always start this conversation. Leadership. That word means a lot of things to a lot of people. What does leadership mean to you, and what does it mean to be a leader?
For me, it means responsibility. It also means a certain amount of humility. I've sometimes joked that I'll walk into one of my businesses and I think, if my employees knew about the adolescent stuff that was going on in my brain while I was driving over here, there's no way they would follow me. But I think ultimately, though, it does come down to integrity. It comes down to being somebody who people feel like they can trust and want to follow, so that when I do make a decision, even if they don't like it, they'll go, yeah, let's see how this works out. He's done okay so far for us, so we'll do it his way.
Are there leaders that you had earlier in your career, in your life, that they had a sense of integrity and they helped you become the leader that you are today? Did you have good role models in that sense?
Yeah, I was super lucky. I mean, I have to start with my mom, right? My mom was somebody who, she's a very, very hard worker. She set a good example of that, but she was also willing to tell me no when no was the thing that I needed to hear as a kid. My dad was a guy, my dad passed unfortunately not very long ago, but he was a guy who you could like drop in a Home Depot somewhere, pardon me, and he'd walk out, he'd go, hey, did you know that cashier has a cousin who grew up in the same town as I did in Iowa? He was that kind of a guy, just a very engaging person. And so he was a great example of how to build rapport quickly and how to be curious about other people, not just yourself. But then when my parents divorced, I ended up with a stepfather who was also a super great guy. And he took me all over the country racing BMX bicycles, things that honestly my own father wouldn't have been able to do that. And so thankfully Wayne was willing to. And so he set also a great example of work ethic and selflessness. And he got kind of caught up in the enthusiasm of what I was doing. But then when I kind of exhausted what Wayne could teach me, I met a man named Bill Marquis who owned multiple businesses, and he kind of saw that I had been winning in what I was doing and really kind of helped me understand that all the things that I did that caused me to win then, I could do in my adult life, if you will, and win there as well. And so we did business together and had a great rapport. So really kind of person after person in my life, I've been very lucky to have the right people show up at the right time to get where I needed to go.
You talked about curiosity there, being curious about other people. In what ways are you curious as a leader to your team and curious about your team members?
You know, I'm always curious about what is going to motivate them. I'm always curious if I see somebody who's been performing and they're maybe slipping a little bit. I kind of find myself going, what is that battle that they're fighting that I don't know anything about? And can I be helpful in that in some way? Leadership is an interesting thing, because when I was much younger, I would assume everybody wanted to be a leader. I would assume everybody wanted to grow and become the general manager or the president or whatever. And I would identify people who I thought had real talent, or maybe they just had charisma and I thought it was talent at the time. And I would try and mentor them and try and help them get where I thought they wanted to go. And then when they would fall short, it would disappoint me a little bit. And I would think, well, if they don't want it, I can't want it for them. If they don't want it, then I need to be supporting somebody else. So as you get older, you get better at identifying that, I think, and saying, okay, this person does have the drive and the hunger. And other people are very content doing their job, hopefully doing it well and going home. And that's okay. You need those people on the team as well. It's just over time, you realize that not everybody wants the same thing.
Are there certain questions that you ask those team members to help you identify the ones from your perspective, have the drive and desire to become leaders versus those who say, I'm really good at this and I want to keep being the best at this, but this is what I want. I don't want to be a leader.
You know, most of the time I'm dealing with the people who are in the leadership roles in my business. So by the time we're having a lot of conversations, they've already been identified as the leader. But if it's not, for instance, in another business I have outside of the family entertainment center business, I have a pharmacy. And we had a guy who was a pharmacy tech. wanted to become a pharmacist in charge. That's what it's called in that businesses. Your pharmacist in charge is the boss, right? And so we were able to sit down with him and say, where are you trying to go? And he told us that. And we made a plan that once he got through pharmacy school, which is not easy, not a foregone conclusion, but if he made it through, then by the time he got on the other side, the existing pharmacist in charge would be kind of backing down, going more toward retirement. He could become the pharmacist in charge, and it just worked, and it worked. But the question did come, how bad do you want it? And he said, I want this more than anything. And we were thankfully able to make that happen. That's not always easy to do in a small business, but we were able to do it, and it's worked out really well.
You talked about the fact that earlier in your career, you thought everyone wanted to be a leader like you did. When was the moment, if there was a moment that you knew, I want to become a leader, I want to grow in an organization and lead people and manage people and maybe even become an entrepreneur? Was there a moment, or is this something that slowly built over time?
I think it's been like an internal drive maybe all my life. It's, I've always kind of wanted to have a say in what I have to do. And I've always kind of thought if I were in charge, I would be accountable for the results, true, but I would also have the flexibility. And in my business life now, that does work out, because if there's something going on that I need to be there for, I can do that because I have the ability to say, well, I'm going to go do that now. And I know that the work is still going to have to be done, and I'm willing to do it at midnight if that's when I have to do it. But I've always had that drive. And so there wasn't a moment so much as there just was this thing of, I don't want to be average, and I don't want to have an average life. I want to be able to excel, and I'm willing to do the work.
You talked there about wanting to have a say, because I think that two sides of this coin. One is I don't want to be average, and I don't want an average life, and I want to be the best me that I can become. But then there is also I want to have a say, which is not necessarily full Venn diagram overlap.
Sure.
Does that come from a love of freedom or a hate of restriction and rules?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm certain if you were to ask my brothers and my mom, they would say it must be a hate for the rules, because I'm always willing to stretch them a little bit, as long as I'm not encroaching on somebody else's thing. I would never damage anybody else's thing or anything like that. But otherwise, I figure the rules are mostly guidelines for it.
They're suggestions.
Yes,
right?
That's right.
Play within the rules so that you can create the life that you want. That's interesting.
In fact, I'll tell you a quick story. One time, my daughter, I busted her for something, I don't even remember what, and she was kind of upset about it. And she's like, "Well, you don't understand, because you're the boss of everybody." And I said, "Well, I'm not really the boss of everybody." And in fact, today I got a ticket. And she said, "Well, how does that work?" I said, "Well, I didn't stop at a stop sign, and I kind of rolled through it, and a police officer pulled me over and gave me a ticket." And she goes, "Oh, well, how many of those have you had?" Which, by the way, was a plot twist I didn't expect. I might have had a better answer. I might not have even ventured in, but I said,
painted yourself into a corner.
Yeah. And then I even made it worse, because I said, "You mean like in my whole life?" And she said, "Yeah." And I said, "Oh, I don't know, about 5 or 6. And she goes, "Well, you don't care about the law at all."
Whoops.
Yeah. So maybe, but sometimes the rules do have to apply even to me.
Fair enough. Before we started recording, we started down a path that I thought would be an interesting topic for the podcast itself, which was the idea of failure.
Yeah.
And this morning I did a presentation. You happened to be in there talking about the idea that everything that we're really good at, all the skills that we have, part of the reason comes from a long line of failure. And that made you think about an example of when you used to race bikes back in the day. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So every once in a while, it would occur to me that I hadn't crashed in a long time, which is not really something I wanted to do, but I know that failure is a part of the growth. And I know that you're only going to crash if you're trying to do things that you haven't done before, or you're trying to do it faster or better. And so I would say, okay, I look at a spot on my practice track, and I would think, can I get over this series of jumps faster? Or can I get into this turn and pedal maybe a half a crank more, or pedal a half a crank sooner than I otherwise would feel comfortable doing on the way out? What could I do to get better? And so I would practice it, and I would think about all the different ways I could do whatever the obstacle was, and try and keep on getting faster and faster and faster until I either figured out a way to do it quite a bit faster, or otherwise got bucked off my bike and kind of found the limit of my skill at that moment. So, and I think that carries on into other parts of your life, because you were talking about the confidence that comes from the momentum of things going well. And in addition to thinking about sometimes like, I can't believe these people follow me with the adolescent thoughts that go through my brain, it also has many times in my career occurred to me that a big decision has to be made around whatever it is that we're dealing with at that moment. And I'm going to have to make that decision. Ultimately, I'm going to be responsible for it. Other people may give input, but somebody has to make the final call. That's me. And as you've had enough failures and enough successes, you feel a lot more confident doing that, because you also know that failure is a permanent. Unless you're dead, you can learn from it, you can grow from it. It's not a permanent condition if you don't let it be.
Someone else that I interviewed here during this event for the podcast, one of the phrases he uses is, the world keeps turning.
Yeah.
Every time something happens that's wrong, the world keeps turning. You wake up tomorrow and it's not as bad as you thought it was.
Right. Anybody who's ever been through a breakup or something like that, a business has failed, something has happened, you didn't win, whatever it is, you do find that the pain will subside and you will grow. The world does keep going. We can overcome it.
I'm curious, we were also talking a little bit about football coaches, college football coaches. If you were to describe yourself by comparing yourself to a current college football coach, who would that be? Are you the kind of leader that is going to be really rah, kind of pep rally like intensity, bring the energy? Or are you more calm, process-oriented, Nick Saban type of, this is just what we're going to do and how we're going to do it?
I'm definitely more calm and processed. I mean, I like to see people win. I get, it touches my heart. I'll get teary-eyed and choked up and those kinds of things, but I don't get so high in the moment, but I also don't get so low in the moment. So I'm definitely more even-keeled. I'm definitely more process-driven. I saw Nick Saban a few years ago at Bowl Expo, and I was fascinated by his approach to the players and how he would sit down with them and ask them, hey, why are you here? Where are you trying to go in your career and things like that? And it made accountability a lot easier for him later, because if somebody got off track, it wasn't about jumping down their throat and telling them they're an idiot, they're blowing their opportunity and all of those kinds of things. It was, hey, let's talk again. When we visited before, you told me this is where you were trying to go. So is this behavior going to get you there, or is it going to cause you to get off track? And it kind of helps the young people that he deals with get themselves back on track, which is really what has to happen anyway, because they've got to own it. They've got to understand responsibility. We're all responsible for our own results. And so I'm definitely more just naturally built that way.
He connects the consequences to the world they live in, and not just some arbitrary thing because I said so, do it this way.
Right.
You also said in there that when you see somebody succeed, that it kind of get emotional, a little bit choked up. Where does that sense, that kind of heavy emotion come from when you can watch another person succeed? Not everybody, a lot of people will find fulfillment in that, but not everybody will have an emotional connection that deep.
Gosh, I guess it comes from having enough failures too, that I understand the pain. That I understand that when a person really excels, when they really nail it and they hit like their dream moment, I understand what's behind that, all those moments that built up to it, the sacrifice, the discipline, the moments that they missed that they could have been goofing off or whatever. And so I just really appreciate it when people do that. I love live performances for the same reason. I'll go to plays and concerts and things like that. And I love the idea that the people who are performing in this moment, they have to execute. In this moment, they've got to nail it, because it doesn't matter that they were great in the 99 shows that led up to this one. For the people in the crowd this time, this is maybe their first time seeing it, and so they've got to nail it this time too.
Yeah, I really like that. Mm-hmm. That's great. So as we think about the ideas of failure, right? We were talking a little bit about past failures. Is there a particular failure that you're most grateful for, that at the moment it sucked? Because let's be honest, failure never feels good. It always hurts. And sometimes it hurts more than others. But a failure that in the moment it hurt. But when you look back now and you have hindsight, perspective, and context, you're grateful for, because it either led to something else better, or you became a better person because of it, or you learned a huge lesson because of it.
Now, I would say I'm sure I could give you a litany and we could talk about them for a long time, but going back to when I was very young, I remember trying to go door to door selling water filters, right? And I was thinking Zig Ziglar and Brian Tracy and all those guys sold stuff door to door. So if I really want to become a great salesperson, I should probably do this too. And I bought some water filters and went and tried to sell them, and found out that was a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. And so I learned some things about salesmanship. I learned some things about investing too much into inventory and things like that in the first place. I also did a audio program where I interviewed the top 8 racers in BMX at the time. After I got out of the sport, I interviewed the top guys in the sport, because I thought everybody would want to know what these people have to say about winning. They would want to know about how do they prepare to win, and how do they shake off the losses and all of those kinds of things. So to me, it seemed like a no-brainer. There must be an enormous market for this, and I'm the first guy who thought about it. What a genius, right? But it didn't sell very well, because I didn't understand that there's a reason why it's only like the top 1 or 2% or whatever people that really do all the things that you need to do to get to that level and continue to win year after year after year and so on. So I didn't know. So you learn a little bit about understanding the market, and realizing that you can't be a survey of one, is what I call it now, because I learned from that experience, for instance, that, just because I think it would be awesome and I'd love to know what these people have to say, doesn't mean anybody else even cares about it at all. I was able to apply that in my grocery business, because I would see, I have a natural food store, and I would see things on display at some market somewhere, and I'd go back to the store and say, I want to do this. And sometimes it worked out, but a lot of the time it didn't too, because again, it might appeal to me based on my world experience versus somebody else's world experience, which would be completely different.
How many businesses do you currently run? Rather.
Yeah. I mean, I hate to say it because it sounds like I'm bragging, but I'm the president of 12 companies at the moment. However, in terms of, that's entities, right? But in terms of operating businesses, I have a real estate, kind of a commercial real estate ownership business, and a pharmacy and natural food store. And then I started Area 254 really because I wanted to do something that was fun. In the other businesses, I've started businesses within businesses to solve problems. Like I created an executive suites operation because we had a floor that was empty in a commercial office space. And I got into the grocery business because I had a building where the tenant was about ready to, they asked me to cut their rent in half, which would have worked out for me economically. And so instead of doing that, I said, well, how about if I buy your business? And that solved that problem, because then I was able to put energy into it and do something different, whereas he was just going to kind of ride it to the end. So this time, though, this one was about just, I want to do something fun. And that's how Area 254 kind of you'll ultimately evolved into my life.
I want to dive into something that might be unexpected based upon the answer that you just gave.
Okay.
And I want to go back to the very, very first thing you said of, well, I hate to say it because it feels like I'm bragging. Yeah. Where does that sense of trepidation about talking about your accomplishments come from? Because if I think about this from the perspective of, you told me your entire life you wanted a greater than average life and you wanted to be the best version of you. And this is one of the representations, not that your businesses are you, but it's a way to show the level of achievement that you're having in the life that you're building. And when I'm on a podcast and I ask you that question, and the immediate sense is, well, I want to try to downplay this and minimize it. Where do you think that comes from?
That's good. That's a good question, because again, if you were talking to the people in my family, they'd say, what's he talking about? He loves to brag, and I like to play that overly confident character within my own family, in my own friend set. But internally, there is a sense of humility, and maybe it comes from a sense of appreciation too. I'm very grateful for the life that I get to have, and I recognize that other people don't have that, and so I don't want people to hear me speak and say, oh, well, of course he's optimistic. He's got, or he's positive. He's got all these things that have gone well, or whatever. So I guess in this context, I would want to make sure that people understand that I started in a very normal way too. I didn't have wealthy parents or anything like that. We weren't dirt poor or anything like that, but thankfully the right people came into my life and the right circumstances came into my life and life has been good. But I don't want to overdo it. I don't want people to go, oh, look at this guy, man. He really thinks he's pretty bad.
Well, I won't speak for the audience, but I will kind of speak for the audience. I don't feel that way at all. So I just wanted to make sure I recognize that. But I always find it, I mentioned this in the presentation this morning, that I think about and talk about language a lot, because language creates a lot of our reality. It impacts our behaviors. And it's so fascinating to me when someone who has built a lot of things and you're very grateful for the life you have and proud of what you've built and worked really hard will say, well, let me minimize and I don't want to appear too big. And listen, I think the best leaders in the world give public credit to other people and they own the failures. And I think that's what makes really good leaders. But I think in a setting like this, I want to give you credit. And you can say, I'm the president of 12 companies and not have to feel weird about that in this setting.
Yeah, well, I do appreciate that. And I am very grateful for all the people who have been in my life and helped me out. And I'm very into language as well. When you were talking earlier, I was thinking about Tony Robbins used to talk about, he had a show or a thing where he interviewed people at Power Talk, it was called. And one of the CDs that came along with it was titled Watch Your TV, Your Transformational Vocabulary, right? And I was fascinated by that. Like you won't hear me say I can't do it. You will hear me say I'm struggling with, or I'm having a hard time figuring this out, or something like that. But can't doesn't. I won't use that because it is so limiting. It's like, oh, you can't? Well, then it's over. What are we even talking about? So I do try to be aware of the things that I say and how I might program myself by the things that I say. And I try to encourage other people in a similar way.
Let's go back to the idea of 12 companies. How do you manage the mental shift from one company to another and one problem in this company over to this problem in this company? Because it's, I would imagine, very different headspaces, very different kinds of problem solving. How do you compartmentalize when necessary and show up with the right energy for that business or that project or that problem?
Yeah, that's a good question. Thankfully, I've always been able to lock in, right? When I want to do something, I will figure it out. I'll lock in, I'll work as long as I have to work, I'll do whatever I have to do to make it ultimately get where I want it to go. And somehow I've been able to mostly keep the right balls in the air at the right time. Now, I will say though that there's a price to be paid for that, with regard to sometimes even family, people who love you, who want to have your time, and you were available before, but now you're having to focus on something so hard that you kind of hope that they understand that on the backside of this, things will be better, and you'll have that time back with them again. But yeah, I've always been able to focus on the thing that I need to focus on. And yet throughout the day, I might have an issue in the real estate company that comes up. And so my maintenance guy from that might call me and tell me about something, and there might be a decision that needs to be made. And in the grocery store, I might hear that our biggest distributor just decided to raise our prices by 5% on the things that we're buying from them. These kinds of things happen in the course of a day. And yet on Area 254, which is really more of my passion project and where I'm spending my creative energy, those kinds of things bum me out, because I'm like, oh, I really want to create this thing, and I've done the signage and the visuals and things like that in Area 254 because I find it fun, and I'm having to learn the software. I was using Microsoft Publisher to design things, and it's end of life, and so then I had to learn Adobe Express and some of those kinds of things, and I'm endlessly curious, and so I'm glad I get to do that. But as far as shifting from one company to another, thankfully, I've also been able to get great people in each scenario. And so, for instance, on the natural food side, I hired somebody in 2008 when I bought that store. She still runs that department. She absolutely owns that part of the business, just like my pharmacist owns the business side. And so I've got an assistant who kind of owns both of those businesses for me. So there's people who really are there making great decisions, so that I'm not having to make them on a super granular level. I really get to work on it so much, not so much in it.
One of the things that in some of my presentations and trainings that I do, is I talk about the value and importance of mental reset and transition, because so often if you're an owner or you're a leader and you've got things coming at you, you go from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next with no breaks. And that leads to either you become stressed from something that happened 3 hours ago and then you blow up and dump it on someone over here that didn't deserve it. They didn't do anything wrong. Or we just become so mentally exhausted by the end of the day, we're just wiped. And I talk about, and I do this in myself, the value of mentally resetting between one call and the next or one project and the next, to just, even if it's 30 seconds or a minute, kind of closing your eyes, breathing, and then setting the intention for the next thing. Hey, this is the project I'm about to do, or this is the meeting I'm going to have, or that's the company I'm going into right now. What is the energy I need to bring? What are the characteristics in myself I want to focus on for that to be the most productive version of it can be? And mentally do that, and then lock in, and then go do that. And even spending that minute and a half, 2 minutes before that shift allows me to show up so much better in the next thing than if I just default energy, move into it, and just see what the hell happens.
Yeah. I will sometimes drive to whichever business I'm going to go visit in person. And when I get there, I might just close my eyes for a minute and breathe. Just kind of filter out the other things so I can focus on the new thing. And I'll sometimes do that at my desk too. I'll just stop for a minute, breathe, just kind of clear my mind a little bit so I can then focus on the thing that I have to focus on, because there are a lot of distractions available. I otherwise like to go outside when I can, and I like to hike, and so I do have other ways to get out, but I'm a little bit of a productivity freak, I know, because even if I'm hiking on my own, I often will put on a Audible, a book. I listen to like 30 something books a year according to my Audible app, and I listen to them when I'm driving, so I don't have a lot of time that isn't productive. And I know a lot of people would probably feel like, oh, well, he's a workaholic if that's the case, but I don't know. That's just the only way I know, and I don't resent it. I enjoy it. I like to learn new things, and so be it, I guess, if that makes me a workaholic. But to transition, yeah, just closing my eyes and breathing, and just resetting that way, and making sure I can stay calm.
Breathing is a powerful thing. I do it. We all breathe, but very few people intentionally breathe.
Right.
And deep breaths.
Hold it. Exhale.
I do Wim Hof breathing techniques in the morning, which I'm not sure if you're familiar with them.
Yeah.
It's very helpful for me and calming my mind and body, because there's so many. Not only there's so many distractions, but there's so many places that can create stress and create anxiety and create just kind of chaotic energy.
Yeah. I was listening to a lot of political stuff or reading the political things on my phone for a while, and it was frustrating me and the people around me when I talked to them about what was going on. And so I've kind of eliminated that stuff from my life too, and just thought, I'm gonna focus on the things I can impact. I'm not gonna let myself or cause other people around me to get worked up about stuff that's just a little out of our reach.
Speaking of focus, right now, what are you focused on improving? What leadership characteristics, qualities, or skills do you want to improve in yourself that you wish and you want to be stronger?
Well, I would say really for me, it's more on a personal side. I want to make sure that I'm better engaged, because when we were talking about how do you shift from one thing to another, there are times that I'm very focused on something. I'm locked in, right? And so one of my kids might call me, and I want to talk to them. They're the people in my life that I want most to talk to, right? And them and my fiance and a few other family members that I really love, and yet I'll find myself working on still kind of reading that email I was reading, or still putting a little touch on this creative piece I have on my screen while my mind is in it. And so what I'm working on is getting better at setting the work aside, because the work will be there, and even if it does take me a while to get re-engaged and get my mind back to where I was when I got that call, they're not the interruption. The work is at that point. So I'm really trying to get better at making sure that my priorities are right. I don't need to do more businesses. I don't need to do more things, but I know that I want to spend more time with my family and the people I love, and really know that I've given them all of me when I've been there with them.
I can empathize with that. And I think about often the consequences of giving people my distracted attention.
Yeah.
Instead of my full attention.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, you might agree to something that they wanted you to disagree with and that you would have if you had really paid attention altogether. I have a friend who was telling me how he was losing his hearing and he had a habit of just kind of going, yeah, and agreeing with people with what they said, even if he didn't really hear it. And it caused him to get really at odds with his best friend because he agreed to something with the guy's daughter. And it was just this whole thing. And that's when he realized that he needed to get hearing aids. But yeah, there's times that I know that I've got off the phone with one of my kids and I thought I needed to be more engaged. I just could sense that I had let them down in that conversation. Even if they hadn't said it, just like I can feel like they probably wanted more of my just absolute focus on whatever we were discussing, and they deserve it. So
in those moments when that happens and you realize that, get off the phone with, let's say, one of your kids, and you go, I wasn't fully there. I was distracted by this thing in my head or that email over here, whatever it is. The moment you realize that, what is the next thing you do?
I try to make sure I apologize and try to do that. And then beyond that, I don't beat myself up for long over anything. I will then just say, okay, I'm going to have to do better. But if I know I've let somebody down, then I try to apologize for having done it.
Well, and it's amazing to having the recognition and ability to make that apology, because I have to do the same thing in my own life. I'm very much guilty of being I can be the kind of person that while I'm listening to somebody, I'm sort of reading this email on the side or this message comes up, or even if there's nothing around me, my brain is on another problem from work or this other thing over here. And I'm looking at the person, but in my mind, I'm off somewhere else. And sometimes in the moment, I have to be like, you know what? I'm not paying attention enough. I'm sorry. Can you say that again?
Yeah.
And come back to it, because if we let it linger, we let it sit, I think it can create a lot of frustration.
Yeah. I have caught myself doing that same thing, almost like wait, what? Say that again? kind of a moment, because I was about ready to say one thing and I realized that we're really talking about something completely different. And so I've had those moments. Another thing that I found worked for me, and I haven't done this in a long time because they closed the pool that was kind of close to my house, is sometimes I would find a problem that I knew I was going to have to think about for a while, right? And Henry Ford said that thinking is the hardest work there is, which is the probable reason so few people engage in it, right? I've always kind of enjoyed that quote. But once in a while I would come up with something and I would think, I'm taking that to the pool, and I would just kind of go about my day until it was time that I could go and exercise, and I'd jump in the pool and swim for an hour and be able to think about something without any distractions and get out of the pool. And I often would have a solution by the time I got out of the pool, because there was nothing else to do. I may not know how many laps I swam, but at least I solved the problem and knew that I got the exercise I wanted. This is cool.
There's something really interesting about that concept of thinking time, because you're right. We get down moments, and what's the first thing that we do? We use our phone, and we have this distraction, even thing, and we don't let our brains just sort of sit. Whether it is to specifically say, I want to work on this problem, or to just simply sit and all of a sudden have a random idea of, oh, that's an interesting idea, which we couldn't have had if we didn't give ourselves time to think. At the same time, though, we can't think our way through change. We have to then, once we come up with the idea, we have to act on it. And it can be very easy to get stuck for a lot of people in the overthinking and then just too much analysis and too much thought. I want to have it just right, and then never take any action.
Yeah, paralysis by analysis. I think maybe it's easy to comfort yourself with that too, to say, oh, well, I'm still studying, I'm still trying to figure it out, and so on. But at least in business, and I would argue in life, eventually you have to do something. You have to try something. It will work or it won't work. And I mean, anybody who has built a family entertainment center knows that you're making a big investment to get into it. And somewhere along the line, you start getting close to open. You go, man, I sure hope so. I sure hope people come to my party here. As my part, I have a partner in that business, as he would say. But yeah, eventually you do have to do something. You can't just allow yourself to be distracted by endless research, endless study. Sooner or later, you got to try something.
This has been an awesome conversation, and I feel like we could talk for hours more, and I want to be respectful of your time. So this is how I want to wrap up. My final question here is, for any of the listeners of this podcast, what is one action that you would suggest if they want to become a better leader in their organization? What is something they can start doing today, right now, in order to get on the path to becoming the best leader they can be?
Well, depending on how you learn, I think one thing that has helped me is that I am endlessly curious. And so I learned even decades ago now, that I learned very well by listening to audiobooks. They were on cassettes back then, and then CDs, and now podcasts or whatever, or Audible I mentioned before. So however you learn, look for leadership topics. If there's a coach that you admire, if there's a business person that you admire, and by the way, it can even be actors, or musicians or whatever. I just finished a book by Phil Collins, his autobiography. For some reason, it came across my mind, and I thought, well, I like Phil Collins. I'm curious to hear what his story is, and you can learn things from lots and lots of sources. So, but to start, I would say, think about who do you admire as a coach or a business leader. And if they've written a book, or if there's been books written about them, then go read those. And if not, then pick up the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Pick up Think and Grow Rich. There's books that a lot of people who have achieved something, you'll find that they have in common. Ray Dalio's Principles was really interesting and newer than 7 Habits and Think and Grow Rich and so on. But be curious, keep growing, learning, keep trying stuff, fail again, win, whatever it takes.
Well, this conversation, I think, is going to help all the people out there who are curious to learn from your story and your perspective. So thank you so much for joining us on the show. And thank you all for listening. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to subscribe and send this episode to a friend that you think would enjoy it as well. And go out there, take action in your business, and become the leader that your team needs you to be.